Hey everybody, welcome into the HUBCast. It is Tuesday, September 13th. I'm Adam Alexander with Russell Wenrich and Max Harnett.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
You got those names right.
What, did I say it wrong the first time?
Oh, I didn't say that.
Oh, okay. Well, sorry. Anyway, I'm glad you guys are here, and I appreciate you playing along, and you know it is the postseason. So we all need to step it up a notch, and when we've all got our brackets, we're going to share them with the folks at home. So here we go, a little bracket breakdown as we tell you who will win the championship in 2016. But let's go ahead and get to it. I want to put up Max's bracket, so if you're watching at one of our video places, you can see exactly who Max picked. Max, go ahead and run us through the 12 guys you had advancing from round 1 to round 2.
Yeah, all right, we'll go top to bottom. I think stick with the obvious. First, you got Kyle Busch, Brad Keselowski, Denny Hamlin, Kevin Harvick, Carl Edwards, Martin Truex Jr., Matt Kenseth, Joey Logano, Kyle Larson, Kurt Busch, Chase Elliott, and Jamie McMurray.
All right.
Those are my 12.
Those are your 12.
The guys I didn't have advancing, Austin Dillon, Chris Buescher, Tony Stewart, and Jimmie Johnson.
Now, Russell, take us through your 12, or if you want to make things easy, tell us the 4 guys that you had eliminated, not advancing.
So I'll just go over the 4 guys I had eliminated, and it's Jimmie Johnson, Chris Buescher, Chase Elliott, and Austin Dillon.
Okay. Now, I'll tell you who I had eliminated, and we all pretty much agree with one exception. I eliminated Jimmie Johnson. I said the 6-time champ will not move on. I eliminated Tony Stewart, who's won 3 titles, Chris Buescher, the rookie, and Austin Dillon, who's in for the first time from Richard Childress Racing. So when you break that down, really the only difference was Max, you and I both had the 24 of Chase Elliott advancing,
right?
Where Russell, you had the 14 of Tony Stewart. You were eliminating Chase Elliott. Why did you feel like Chase Elliott will not advance, and what do you like about Tony Stewart in the opening round?
Well, Chase Elliott just hasn't been good like the last 11 races. I think he's got 2 top 10s. One was at Michigan where it's an experimental package. Another was Darlington, I believe, and they just don't relate. They just don't have the momentum going forward. I think Stewart's going to be good enough at Dover, New Hampshire, and Chicago to get him through on points at least.
What about you, Max?
Yeah, I kind of didn't look at it head-to-head so much. I kind of was going through and looking at guys that I think will advance just based on where they're running. And guys like that we kind of are down at the bottom of the chase grid that I have advancing, guys like Kyle Larson, Jamie McMurray, I think they're running so well right now. It basically you ran out of spots for guys, and it came down for me. Chase Elliott wasn't the last guy I had in. Jamie McMurray was, and he's the only reason I haven't beaten out Stewart is just how fast those guys are running right now.
I think for me, the first 13 or 14, were pretty easy to move on. There were certainly, to me, there were a dozen that, barring something unforeseen like what we saw with Jimmie Johnson last year, you could easily say, this guy's got what it takes to move to the second round.
Sure.
But to me, this was the most difficult year we've ever had to figure out, just on paper and looking at history, who those last couple of spots were going to go to. And I know we did our Chase War Room piece that will air later in the week on Race Hub, and then we'll also air this weekend on Race Day. We got some of the best minds in the business coming in here to break down these brackets. There are just no clear lines on some of the guys that are going to be eliminated. And I look at Tony Stewart, and I really think some of the trouble he's had and the things we've seen him getting involved in the last couple of weeks, in a way, are him setting the tone for the chase. Him sending a message to everybody. Get out of my way. I'm the captain of the ship. This is my last opportunity, and you're not going to hold me back from getting a championship. Kind of the mind games we've seen him play when a championship is on the line in years past. However, the reason I didn't have him advancing is I looked at his numbers, and I realized the last 4 weeks in the tracks we've been to don't totally equate to what we'll see in the chase.
That's the tough part for picking this.
But he was so good throughout the summer, and the last 4 weeks he hasn't been in the top 20. I almost wonder if he could be psyching himself out a little bit. I don't know. That's maybe overanalyzing, but I feel like the last couple of weeks and the way things have gone maybe takes him out of his rhythm a little bit.
Yeah, but okay, so his problem at Richmond was he was running 9th. That was a battle for 9th.
Oh,
so
yeah.
He was running top 10 there. Darlington, he was running, I think it was more 15th-ish. They had issues at Bristol, right? They had problems. What happened to him at Bristol? Do you remember?
I don't know that I totally remember.
So I think he had a problem at Bristol. So it's not like they've run bad. It's just they've had bad finishes.
Yeah, and I guess my thing is too, the thing that made me so confident in Tony Stewart over the summer is not only were they running good and they had the results to show for it, okay? I mean, and really, if you go back to when he won at Sonoma, from that point on, it was rare that they weren't a player in the top 10 and in many cases the top 5. But I just felt like Tony was calm and relaxed and having fun. I have sensed the last couple of weeks that maybe that hasn't totally been the case.
Tensed up a little bit.
And I think maybe there is a little bit of pressure.
Yeah.
And I get it. I mean, let's face it. I mean, this is it for him, and he realizes that. But anyway, so surprisingly, we really only disagree on one set of guys, Chase Elliott or Tony Stewart.
And I think those could go, like, I'm not going to argue,
Right.
One or the other there.
Now it gets a little more difficult. We're going from 12 to 8. The guys that let's just go through the guys we eliminated. We got Max's picks up here. We're going to see the 8 here. These are the 8 drivers that you have on the board. So Max, we see your 8.
Let me tell you who I eliminated.
But tell us who you eliminated.
I eliminated Jamie McMurray and Chase Elliott, 2 guys we just talked about. The other 2 guys I had going out, Kurt Busch and Joey Logano.
So that leaves Kyle Busch, Denny Hamlin, Carl Edwards, Matt Kenseth. You got the 4 guys from Joe Gibbs. You got the other Toyota and Martin Truex Jr. You had the first-year guy, Kyle Larson, advancing to the round of 8. Kevin Harvick, who's been so good in this format, and the lone Ford of Brad Keselowski. Those are the 8 guys that you put in the round of 8. Russell, what do you have?
So I had the same as Max, with the exception of I've eliminated Kyle Larson and Carl Edwards instead. So also Stewart and McMurray, but those are already gone from Max. So those were the guys that I took out.
And who do you have in place of them?
I have going on Logano and Kurt Busch.
And I did not have Kurt Busch advancing, and I put Kyle Larson in, and I also advanced Joey Logano. Carl Edwards doesn't make the cut for me. And so my 8 ended up being Kevin Harvick, the 5 Toyotas, with the exception of Carl Edwards. So he's the only guy that's got the Gibbs Toyota thing going on that didn't advance for me. Joey Logano, Kyle Larson, and then Brad Keselowski. I had both Penske cars in the round of 8.
Yeah. I just haven't seen the same speed out of Penske that I think we saw last year. And the reason I have Brad moving on, I think Talladega is a big wild card race, and right now there's nobody better at restrictor plates than Brad Keselowski. And I got to think that's an X factor for him. But I really don't think the Fords of Penske have the same speed that we've seen from the rest of the field.
Did you, Max, you did or did not have Kurt Busch moving on?
I did not have Kurt moving on.
You did not. No. I didn't either, and you did, Russell. Make a case for Kurt Busch.
Well, they've been just consistent over the time, and I just think their consistency will get them through to that round.
And Kurt was one of the hardest ones for me on this grid, and I'll tell you why. Is lately they've had a couple of really bad runs with a couple of crashes and finishes in the 30s. And I kind of looked at it like, man, Kurt could be one of those guys that's one of those early round upsets that could get left in the round of 16, in my opinion. But with as consistent as they were to start this season, also one of those guys that can make a run all the way to the Final Four kind of quietly.
Here's the thing, though, you have to look at. You've got to look at the races in each round. The opening round, Chicago, Loudon, Dover, okay? But then we go to round 2, 2 mile and a halves. You go Charlotte, Kansas, then you go to Talladega. And when I look at the stat line, and I did not advance Kurt Busch to the round of 8, okay? But when we did the War Room thing, and we're breaking it down, the one thing that kept coming to me for Kurt Busch in the round of 12 that gave him an advantage to move on to the round of 8 was nobody has a better average finish this year at the 6 mile and a half races than Kurt Busch. To me, that is a major stat line.
Yeah.
You couple with that Talladega. Now, you could argue and say Kurt Busch hasn't won a plate race, one of the few elite drivers that hasn't won a plate race.
Yeah.
I would come back and say he may not have won, but he's in the hunt just about every time we're at Daytona or Talladega.
And he doesn't necessarily need to win.
Right. So for me, here I am making a case for a guy that you advanced and I didn't, but I do think it's compelling to look at Kurt Busch. If he does advance from the round of 16 to the round of 12, those tracks to me set Kurt Busch up for success.
And look at the beginning of the year. Look how good he was until he won at Pocono. And then after that, his numbers have declined. I think there's a couple guys like that this year where once they won, they tried stuff. Their performance the numbers didn't show after that. So I really think, including what you said on the mile and a half, so we got 2 of them in that round. I think they're going to be okay.
For me, going in that round, though, I had to look at the Toyotas have been so fast on mile and a half. I think they've been the fastest on mile and a half. That's why I moved all 5 of them. The 4 JGR guys and Martin Truex Jr. all moved forward in that round pretty easily for me. I added Brad because of the Talladega X Factor. I think he could win that race. And now I have 2 spots left. I moved Kyle Larson. I think he's got mojo going right now. He's been running so well. They just seem to be on a roll. I think they continue to stay on that roll. And then it was Kevin Harvick, Kurt Busch, Joey Logano. And for me, it was Kevin Harvick is the strongest out of that group.
And I moved Kyle Larson to the round of 8. You did not move Kyle Larson to the round of 8.
I didn't.
What's the difference for you on Kyle Larson? Because you did have him getting from the round of 16 to the round of 12.
I just think that luck in that good streak has to stop somewhere.
Because they have been on an absolute roll.
This is Ganassi's best streak since 2004 for a team.
Yeah.
So they've done really well, but I think that's got to run out. And it's not that he's that bad. It's just there's other guys, like being in the top 8 is not easy in this sport.
I'm looking at the guys that we advanced, for the most part, from the round of 16 to the round of 12. And I'm thinking about those that were in the round of 12 that maybe now are kind of playing with house money. I had Chase Elliott going to round 2. I had Kyle Larson going to round 2. Jamie McMurray I had in round 2. And you guys have some of these too. I realize that maybe you don't have all of them, but you've got some legit guys that could go out in that round of 16 that moved on to the round of 12 that I think all of a sudden just are laying there in the weeds and nobody expects them to do anything. How much do you think that helps a guy, and what is the likelihood that we see a surprise driver or 2 make it through a couple of rounds in this chase? Too much talent at the top, or can one of these little guys, so to speak, make a big play?
I think there's too much talent. I don't see, especially in the round of 12, to me they are not big enough wild cards. And I know we always talk about Talladega being a wild card. To me, it's not like a fuel mileage race where you can get away with something. There's not that big gamble of a track that you can kind of sneak one by on everybody. Talladega, you can call it a wild card, but really it's who has the most talent driving on that track that is going to get themselves to the front.
I would say
that's where I have trouble advancing some of these wild card guys or house money guys like McMurray. I just don't think they have the speed to keep up with these other guys.
But I would say this about Jamie McMurray. If he's able to get into the round of 12, we're going to tracks that are in his wheelhouse.
Yeah.
Charlotte is a great track for him. Got a couple of wins there. And the last time he went to victory lane was Talladega, and you're not going to get anybody to argue that Jamie's a great plate racer. And so that, to me, is where you really have to dig deep. And you have to say, if this guy can get from here to here, all of a sudden, he becomes a real player. Now to me, once you've gone from the round of 16 to the round of 12, and then you get down to the round of 8, you've cut the chase in half. To me, this is when the playoffs really begin. I look at that grouping of tracks in the round of 8. Martinsville, Texas, and Phoenix. So much diversity there. You've got the only short track on the schedule in the playoffs. You got the mile and a half at Texas. I just feel like the intensity from Talladega to Martinsville goes to a whole new level, and you're dealing with 8 guys that absolutely any of them can win the title. So with that, let's break down our round of 8. Max, we'll start with you, and I want you to tell us a little bit about those guys and who you think are the front runners to go on to the Final Four.
My front runner is Denny Hamlin. Right now, I think he is to me, the fastest car on the track every week. He's proven it the last couple weeks. I have Denny moving on. I have Kyle Busch moving on. I think Kyle has continued to show that he has been fast all year. I have Martin Truex Jr. and Carl Edwards. I have all Toyotas in there. I really just think the Toyotas are faster than everybody, and those are. I know it's probably not likely, but if I'm playing the odds, those are my 4 guys I like to get there.
And your number 1 guy to move on, the first name you mentioned was Denny Hamlin. Now on your sheet here, it's got Kyle and then Denny. But was he kind of your number 1? I mean, the guy you felt most confident about was Denny Hamlin?
1A, I'd say.
And there was a lot of love given on Race Hub this week to Denny Hamlin. A lot of people feel like he's peaking at the right time.
Deservedly so.
Russell, what about you as you look at your championship 4?
Well, first, it's obvious that Max must drive a Toyota, right?
Evidently. Or he's trying to get a deal on one.
I will drive whatever car someone pays me to drive.
So I have Denny Hamlin, Martin Truex Jr., Brad Keselowski, and Kevin Harvick moving on. And I would say Denny Hamlin, I agree with Max, has the most momentum to move on. And then I think you look at Truex at those tracks and how consistent he is. Brad Keselowski again, and then how can you go against Kevin Harvick? He's been in the Final Four the 2 other years we had this format, so I just think those are the obvious picks right there.
You and I have the exact same championship 4.
Yeah, well, okay, but let's say, let's be honest here, Max. Who submitted their picks first?
Russell absolutely does picks in first.
That's fine. So you thinking like I copied off of you?
Just
Because I'm going to tell you what, there's not a lot of striving to be like Russell in my life. You know what I'm saying? I'll tell you what though. Who was your number one guy to advance? Who number one most confident for sure lock that in the Final Four?
So I did it a little different. I go by the champion then backwards.
That's what I was going to ask. When you guys fill out your brackets, do you start round of 16, round of 12, and go through chronologically like how we've introduced them today? Or do you say, these are my top guys and work champion backwards? How do you guys do it? Did you do the whole thing backwards?
I did the whole thing backwards, but I would go back in to look at the numbers, and I may change 1 or 2 out.
How about you, Max?
I went the other way. I started at the 16 and advanced guys.
And I went 16 through. I went, left to right on the bracket.
Yep.
But I had a really good idea. I had 2 names that were for sures for me that were going to be in my Final Four.
Really?
Martin Truex Jr. was going to be in my Final Four, and Kevin Harvick. Those were no-brainers to me. Those were my most confident picks in the Final Four.
And I didn't have Kevin Harvick in my Final Four.
Yeah, right. And why not? Why no Kevin Harvick?
I think the issues on pit road have not fully worked themselves out yet. I think that those may rear their head again, and I don't think that they're as dominantly fast as they were a year or 2 ago. Last year or the year before that, I just don't see the same speed compared to the rest of the field. I think the Toyotas are faster right now, and I think they're the best pit crews on pit road, and they have the fastest cars on track, and to me, that's a recipe for success.
So I agree a little bit with Max, but when he has his issues on pit road, he's still finishing second or top 5, and that'll get him to the final.
Will it?
I believe so.
I think because if you look at those tracks, Martinsville, Texas, Phoenix.
Well, he's going to win Phoenix.
He didn't win Phoenix in the spring.
Yeah, he did.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry.
In the fall, he did.
I'm sorry.
But that was rain short.
Yeah.
But he led 170 some laps, and then during a green flag.
But that is where I go back to the track thing makes such a difference. And 2 years ago, Kevin Harvick got out of the gates a little slow, but he was able to win at Charlotte to advance to the round of 8. Once he got in the round of 8, his back was against the wall, but he went and took care of business at Phoenix, advanced to Homestead. And I saw in your notes, Kevin Harvick's last 3 chase wins were all must-win situations. He was done in the opening round last year and went out and laid it on him at Dover in the elimination race in the round of 16. The year before that, he had to win Homestead, obviously, as you do. You want to win the season finale to win the championship. He did, and then as we talked about, won at Phoenix. So I just think Kevin Harvick's so good at Phoenix. If he gets to that 3rd round, the only way he doesn't win Phoenix is he knows he's in a position to point in and they play it conservative. I think if he needs to win Phoenix, he goes out and wins Phoenix. And
see, I think Denny Hamlin goes out and wins Martinsville. I think Martin Truex Jr. goes out and wins Texas. And I think Kevin Harvick's going to have to battle 4 other guys probably for those final spots. And the guys he's battling against are no joke. Guys like Carl Edwards, Kyle Busch, Matt Kenseth. I mean, guys that I think can bring it. And I think that's a big thing to live up to, especially if he does not have good races in those first 2 tracks.
Well, when Kevin Harvick won at Phoenix in the spring, it was by inches over Carl Edwards.
Right.
And so he was not as dominant there or didn't win as convincingly in the end is what we've seen him do in previous years and in similar circumstances. We're down now to the Final Four, and you've got the 4 Toyotas there.
Yeah.
And Russell and I have the same picks with a little more diversity with Martin Truex Jr., Denny Hamlin from the Toyota camp, Kevin Harvick, and Brad Keselowski.
Played it safe, picking
We were
all
PC.
different manufacturers.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine.
We got a note from NASCAR that said help us out a little bit. Your champion and why in 2016, Max?
My champion is Denny Hamlin. I think he's the fastest car right now. I think he's the fastest car with the fastest team, and he's got a fast pit crew. I think it all adds up. I think it comes together finally. I think Denny's had some heartbreak in years past. If we go back to the chase, I think this year is the year they put it all behind them.
Any concerns about a first-year crew chief in Mike Wheeler, realizing that last year Kyle Busch won the championship with first-year crew chief Adam Stevens?
That would have been my answer to that. Is no, I don't think it's. I think it's a race by race, and he's proven that he can manage with the best of them. So I see no reason why not.
Russell, you and I both picked Martin Truex Jr. to win his first
Shocker.
championship in 2016, and you say the 78. Why?
Because they're the only team I think that's proven that they can win every week. Like they've shown out of the box they could win every race, and they won the two. They were 5 feet away from winning the biggest race of the year. Then they won the other crown jewels of the Charlotte with the Coke 600, and then they won at Darlington. 2 big races. They've shown they can win big races. I have no doubt, and it's like a twilight race in Homestead. Mile and a half. They've been really good. Mile and a half, especially when it gets dark.
It's funny that you mentioned those crown jewel races as being a reason to pick Martin, and we looked at this last week with the average finishes of guys in those 4 races, and the guy we talked about being right behind Martin Truex Jr., Denny Hamlin this year.
Which, is another good reason maybe to put both those drivers in the Final Four, and we all had both the 78 and the 11 going to Homestead and competing for the championship. To me, Truex, it's exactly what you said. The schedule just sets up so good for him with these mile and a half tracks. And while he hasn't won them all, they're in position. They're leading the laps. He's led almost 800 laps of the 6 mile and a half races this year. I believe that's right. I think it's like 758 or something.
It's
I think
like 500 more than anybody else.
Yeah, it's not even close.
Yeah.
And when you're knocking on the door that much, eventually, it's going to happen. So I really like them, and almost a team of destiny when you consider some of the things that they have been through.
Who would be your dark horse? I know we don't, probably not on your grid, but who would be your dark horse as someone that could really surprise this field?
No doubt the 42. No doubt the 42 of Kyle Larson. I think they have shown in the last few weeks, and you can back me up on this or tell me I'm wrong. I think we've gone to a lot of tracks where he doesn't necessarily have a great history, and he's outperformed his resume.
Sure.
And I just think when that's happening, you start feeling like here's a guy that can get it done anywhere. And I think the numbers, in many ways do support him, but recent history would suggest they've got the speed to get it done.
Who's you got? Who's your dark horse?
I don't know if you can argue with him, and I don't. As a dark horse, I think he's the only dark horse that can make it.
Kyle?
Like make a run for it. Other than that, I don't think you can call, because I think Carl Edwards can make a run for it, but I don't think you can call him a dark horse. Or Kenseth, I think he can make a run, but I can't call him a dark horse either. So
see, I kind of had Kurt as my dark horse, but you wouldn't consider him a dark horse. You got him in your final 8, but I would kind of see he's a guy that could fly really under the radar, just consistent finishes.
They haven't been running so well lately, so I could see that.
The one other guy I would make a case for, and I said this early in the year, that if Chase Elliott can find his way into a chase, a guy that drives for Hendrick Motorsports with a team in the 24 that made it to the championship for last year, obviously with Jeff Gordon driving, the lack of pressure maybe, and I realize there can be a lot of pressure for someone in his position, but I just think given circumstances, he's not going to be feeling it, and the expectations maybe aren't going to be there like they are for the other teams. He could make a run. Now, recent history and what they've done here the last third of the regular season, maybe not. But if you look at his numbers at mile and a half tracks, top 10 in 4 of the 6, wrecked at Las Vegas when he was running the top 10, wrecked at Kentucky when he was running in the top 5. If they can continue this trend at mile and a half tracks, and Chicago, while he's not been there in a Cup car, good to him in an Xfinity car, I think a case can be made for Chase Elliott. I didn't pick him to go through, but I just think there are some things there that when you look back on it, if he makes a run, you could say, well, okay, maybe that's not surprising.
Yeah.
So
No chance.
You say no chance. Okay, well that's fine.
Shoot that down.
I think we should go and get some people maybe that are watching on Facebook Live and get their comments and thoughts. So let's bring in CJ. CJ always does a great job of managing that. What's the traffic been like so far today, CJ?
So I was kind of trying to take a look and see maybe who the fans were favoring for their picks and see if I could come up with a consensus. I believe I saw every driver picked at least once.
To get to the championship four? Or as a champion?
To be the champion.
Oh, okay.
Every driver I saw
all
as
16.
a name in a comment at some point or another. There were a couple of good questions that I plucked out to see what you guys thought. Jared, I knew this question would come up. What was your initial reaction to Ryan Newman's comments after his run-in with Tony Saturday night?
Yeah, I was shocked. I was surprised at that. And I think a lot was made of, man, Tony, Ryan drove for Tony and they had a relationship and all those things. I just think there's so much respect at that level of NASCAR. And, there are certain places that you don't tend to see people go. And that one, obviously got personal. And that was surprising to me. Not just because it was Ryan and Tony and what their perceived relationship was, but because I just think that no matter what the differences are in that garage, for the most part, the respect levels at a high enough place, you're not going to get there, and they obviously did.
And the second part of Jared's question was, do you think he wishes he could take it back?
Boy, I don't know. I ain't gonna get into that. I don't know. I can't begin. I don't know. I can't imagine what he was thinking when he said it. I certainly can't imagine what he's thinking on if he should take it back or not.
You don't want to put words in his mouth. You certainly don't want to take him out of them.
I'm not gonna go down that road.
Lawrence asked, who do you think is the more sentimental favorite for the championship, Tony Stewart or Martin Truex Jr.?
I would say Tony Stewart for me. I don't know, that may have changed the last couple of weeks when he's wrecking people, but what do you guys think?
Ooh, it's tough. I would say the majority of people would say Martin Truex Jr., but I think more passionately people would say Tony Stewart. I think just because more people like, or I should say Tony Stewart's a little more divisive than Martin Truex Jr. is. For me, though, it's Tony Stewart in his final year.
It's got to be Tony Stewart.
When's the last time we said sentimental and Tony Stewart in the same sentence? That doesn't happen very often. But I think Martin Truex would be a great feel-good story, but it's just hard to argue with a guy that's been as much the sport as he has as Tony Stewart, who in a way is a little bit of an underdog. I mean, I don't he, even though he's a three-time champion, he's probably not in most people's top 10 of the favorites to win the championship this year.
And I'll say this, looking 4 or 5 years down the road looking back, I think right now we kind of look at Martin Truex and Vern Truex as this kind of like underdog story of coming up and conquering the big teams. In 5 years, that's not going to be the case. Martin's going to have a bunch more wind under his belt. Vern Truex is going to be a powerhouse team like a Penske is with a 2-car operation, whereas 5 years from now, if we look back, it's always going to be Tony's last year. And if he can win on his last year going out, that's going to be one of the all-time great stories in NASCAR.
Much like we saw the celebration last year when Jeff Gordon won at Martinsville and had clinched a spot in the championship 4. If Tony Stewart can get there and climb that mountain, it would be an unbelievable story. I think we got time for at least one more.
Nate wants to know, do you think we will ever see the Jimmie Johnson level of dominance again with the chase system?
I don't think with this format you can. I think it's way too unpredictable. And even if there were someone that dominated the regular season, we saw it last year with Jimmie Johnson in that opening round at a track in Dover where he's virtually unbeatable. One small part failure and you're out. The separation is so slim, I think it's hard for someone to go on a run like what we saw with Jimmie Johnson.
A bad finish now basically almost eliminates you. So that's where this system doesn't allow for that anymore.
See, I would disagree in that it doesn't allow for it because a win gets you through. You can botch the first 2 races and win the third and you move on. My question would be, what would be more impressive to you if someone made a Jimmie Johnson-like run in this format or in the old format? Because in the old format, it was 10 races total. You got to be good for all 10. Now you can stumble a little bit and still make it through the next round. You get a reset.
I would say this though, Jamie McMurray in the opening round last year had an average finish of 11.3. 11.3, almost averaged a top 10 finish. He did not advance.
Right, but we talked about this with Kevin Harvick last year. Stumble, win at Phoenix.
Yeah, oh yeah, you do get second chances. You do get second chances, but you're talking about the pressure of having to win in a tight window. And I think
What would
that's
be
hard.
more impressive to you?
To me, what would be more impressive is to win 5 in a row in this format. And not that makes you better. What Jimmie Johnson did, I think, makes him the greatest of all time. But I do think there is so much luck involved in this format that it would make it more impressive to do it in this format. All right, I think we're out of time.
Yeah, but one more. Ray was the first to ask it. Picks for Chicago.
Picks for Chicago. I am going to go at Chicago. Oh, this is good.
Max is referencing the dartboard.
I'm gonna go Kevin Harvick at Chicago. Where do you go?
I go. Oh, that's hard. Let Max go first.
Go, Max.
You're going to take all the JGR drivers again like you did the other week. I'm going to go.
I picked Hamlin, just so you know, last week and won.
Yeah. I'll go Kyle Busch.
You say Kyle Busch. I say Kevin Harvick, and you say
Matt Kenseth.
None of us picked Martin Truex Jr. He's the best at mile and a half. All right, there we go. Hey, we'll do it again next week.
All right.
And CJ, thanks. We'll see you next time. Have a great week, everybody.